Welcome to the InfoSec Insider podcast, brought to you by URM, the UK's leading information and cybersecurity specialists.
Hi, my name's Annie and I'm here today with Frazer Grudings, who's one of our senior consultants here at URM. Welcome to another episode of InfoSec Insider. So Frazer and I are going to be talking today about clause 5.1 of ISO 27001, which is called leadership and commitment. So Frazer, just to start us off, can you tell us what conformance to clause 5.1 involves?
Yeah, sure can, Annie. So whenever you look at the standard and you come across clause 5.1, it identifies a number of specifics or specific aspects that need to be demonstrated by top management in relation to your information security management system. And it quite conveniently does list a few of these aspects for you, but you don't have to just stick with those. You can go beyond that if need be. But what I thought I'd run through some sort of examples against those different aspects, so that people get a feel for how that can be demonstrated, because quite often leadership and commitment is overlooked because it's deemed quite straightforward. You know, the fact that a company is elected to get ISO 27001 certification, sometimes that can be construed as that's the leadership involvement. It's part of it, but obviously there's a lot more that they can demonstrate. So hopefully by going through these aspects now, it will help people when they're going through that process of implementation. So it talks about accountability for the effectiveness of the management system. And that can be demonstrated through leadership attendance in meetings such as management reviews. Also that they're in attendance for opening and closing meetings for audits. And it can be demonstrated if the management or top management are involved in the planning and establishing an information security management system, particularly if a company's on the journey of implementing, an ISMS. And if they can demonstrate that they've got regular communication to the business. Now that might be in the form of team meetings or town hall meetings, as they're often called. It might be through emails, or it might be communications through the intranets in terms of updates, where leadership are passing on why the business is trying to achieve 27001, why they're implementing an ISMS, and why it's important to the business in that respect. So that's a very powerful way of leadership showing their commitment at the outset. Another aspect is ensuring that there is an information security policy and ensuring that there's objectives that have been established that are compatible with the context of the business, so the strategy or direction of the company. You don't want to be setting objectives that kind of go in the opposite direction of that. So leadership can play a key part in establishing those objectives. That would also be demonstrated within the implementation and planning stage of an ISMS. Obviously, it's a requirement to have objectives and a policy. But if the leadership can demonstrate that they've had a part to play in setting those things up, they may have endorsed the policy, so they may sign it. It may be something that they have communicated, through the intranet. It may be on display, and it has the leadership sort of signature there. So it's a visual commitment that people can see. But also, as well as establishing objectives, it can be demonstrated that they have regular review and they're monitoring those objectives, how they're performing. Are we going to achieve that objective? If it's not going to be achieved, then leadership can kind of step in and kind of steer where the direction of that objective can go. They may have a part to play in choosing a different objective, or they may just be helped by clearing barriers so that the objective can be achieved or progressed in a positive fashion. Another aspect is ensuring that the integration of the information security management system into the business and its processes. So leadership can do this by demonstrating that the organization's day-to-day activities around the ISMS have been established. They can also provide their support in terms of ensuring that the information security controls are embedded in any product development that an organization might be going through, any HR processes and systems, or procurement and operational processes. So it's essentially ensuring that information security is embedded at the outset of any new project or implementation, a process, and it's not an afterthought. So it's something that's at the forefront of all the discussions in that respect. And leadership can kind of bring that to the table in those discussions by setting the scene, that they find that information security is very important and it should be factored into everything that a business does. Another one of the aspects is around promoting the use of process approach and risk-based thinking. So it's very, very relevant to any of the ISO systems, an approach for risk-based thinking. But in terms of ISO 27001, leadership can help by adopting a robust risk assessment methodology that is built around the information security pillars of confidentiality, integrity, and availability, the CIA acronym. Leadership can further demonstrate commitment by being actively involved with reviewing information security risks and risk treatment plans. So there is a requirement for your risk assessment to happen on a regular basis and risk treatment to be identified. If leadership are involved in those meetings, if they're able to sort of take action and apply the ownership of a risk treatment plan to a member of the leadership team, it really does show that there is that commitment there in terms of moving things forward from a risk-based perspective. Another one of the aspects is ensuring that there's adequate resources in place. So leadership can, obviously they'll have the ultimate responsibility for the management system because they're potentially the managing director or the chief executive officer of the business. But from a day-to-day practical maintenance of the system, it's important for leadership to allocate that to a particular person and the right person with the right competence. So quite often that is an information security manager. And ensuring that those individuals have got the full leadership support. So if the information security manager requires training on potentially how to do internal audits, that leadership provide the resources to do that. It's quite important that's clearly evidenced, within the system. If there is going to be use of third parties, or if there's going to be use of particular systems or equipment, the fact that leadership are involved in those discussions and ultimately sign off, for that expenditure, again, is a very powerful way of demonstrating leadership and commitment. Another aspect is in terms of the ISMS results or its intended results. And leadership can demonstrate this through involvement in management review meetings, as mentioned. They can potentially have ownership of some of these actions. So it's not all about delegating or cascading down in that respect, that certain things might fall on their agenda and they pick up and own and run through to completion. In terms of intended results, it's also about promoting the ISMS and ensuring that awareness of that is provided to new starters and that regular awareness is provided to existing staff. So a program of information security training needs to be in place. And again, that can be endorsed through leadership. One of the things that they could actively promote. And a given is the continual improvement of the information security management system. So leadership can help with this by acting on audit findings, feedback from interested parties. So there may have been an issue from a third party that required raising as an incident. If leadership are on board and aware of the incident and throughout the progress of the investigation and then the actions to sort of resolve that, that's a very good way of demonstrating that leadership are involved in the improvement of a management system. And the last element or aspect that I'll talk through is around the engagement or directing and supporting of individuals that contribute to the effectiveness of the management system. So leadership can have ownership of or active support for each of the above responsibilities. And then as long as that is evidenced in some way, then it's something that can be promoted, that they can show that they've been involved in management review meetings, they're on the minutes, in attendance, they have taken action of certain things that have been raised during that meeting, a documented risk review. can be a way of demonstrating, leadership's support to these, important elements and aspects. And obviously, their position can also help with ensuring that information security related legal and regulatory and contractual obligations are also discussed and achieved over a period of time. So it's not a full set of things, that a business may look to do, but it certainly gives a flavour of the types of things that leadership can demonstrate, and then by that they're showing their commitment to an information security management system.
Amazing. Thank you, Frazer. Why do leadership and commitment matter to an organisation's ISMS? And I guess sort of what problems can arise if these things aren't being done?
Well, information security management, it must be compatible to the organisation's business objectives and processes, as I mentioned before. If that's not aligned at the outset, it can quite quickly become clear that the two things aren't aligned, in terms of what the business is trying to achieve and the management system. Often we see it that businesses have implemented 27001 from a sort of tick box exercise perspective. They've not really considered how is this actually going to add value, to the business. And one of the ways of ensuring that takes place is by having leadership involved. They call it sponsorship sometimes, from the outset, so that their goal is clearly aligned to what the business is trying to achieve, and then you can try and develop a management system that supports that goal, that end objective. What we often find through case studies that URM have requested from our clients that have implemented ISO 27001, and we've asked them about the key factors behind successful implementation, and pretty much all of them have flagged that having the right leadership involvement from the outset and continual support through that implementation process has been absolutely key, a key contributor to the successful implementation. One of the other things to bear in mind is if there isn't clear leadership involvement or commitment, certainly from an external auditor's perspective, it can create for an uncomfortable audit. They may not feel that there is leadership commitment here, and that obviously is detrimental to the certification process. And if they have that feeling, that leadership isn't involved, that can have a knock-on effect on everything else that they see within the management system. And it might cause them to look a little bit more stringently at certain areas, because they need to be sure that there is, leadership buy-in, from the outset and throughout all the facets. Often auditors talk about the spirit of ISO 27001 or the culture of information security, and that must come from the top. It's one of those things that it's easy to say that, but sometimes it's difficult to demonstrate it or evidence it. So the aspects that we talked about before, where there's different areas that leadership can show their commitment, become absolutely key to that particular part of the process. However, the flip side of that is if you have got a very engaged and supportive leadership that are able to provide the external auditor with confidence that the organisation is really serious about information security, then it makes for a smoother audit process, shall we say. They don't have the concern that this is just being placed on somebody's shoulders, like an information security manager, and they have all the responsibility. Whereas if it's clear to see that leadership want to be involved in meetings, in the opening meeting of the audit, they want to meet the auditor, they want to share their experience of how they've implemented the system, how they've selected their objectives, it becomes a very powerful tool in that respect. And auditors certainly get a good feeling that this business is serious about information security. And then if they do find weaknesses, which they will do because that's the whole part of an audit, they have the confidence that this organisation can remedy those weaknesses. They'll have a corrective action plan that they'll follow through. That they'll want to ensure that it's an improvement, and that is really, really demonstrable through a supportive leadership in that respect.
Amazing. Thank you, Frazer. It is so essential, isn't it, I guess, just to have that buy-in from the top, because you know, you're never going to get anywhere without that.
It's no. And I say it's so easy to overlook this clause in terms of, okay, we have the signature of the CEO on the policy. A lot of businesses you'll look at the management review meetings, and the apologies for not attending is quite often senior leadership, because they don't see it as an important element. So there is a part to play on the business itself to say, okay, well, how do we sell this management system to leadership? How could they be proud of this? So the way you achieve that is by getting the leadership on board from the very, very start, so that they see there is value to the management system. And beyond that, it offers, the ability to put yourself in line for potential contractual work. It may be that there is a requirement to achieve 27,001 in that respect. So leadership know that, but they can support that it's okay, we've realized that we need this for a certain contract. However, the value of the management system goes far further than that. It reaches further into the business. And by having leadership on board, they can demonstrate that.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Frazer. And for any listeners that want to read up on the subject, we've got a blog on our website, urmconsulting.com, which is called ISO 27001 Clause 5.1, Leadership and Commitment Explained, which Frazer has very kindly written for us. So please go and give that a read, and thank you for listening today. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we would really appreciate it if you could spare a moment to leave a rating or review at ratethispodcast.com/InfoSec Insider. To listen to more episodes, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Podbean.
Thank you for listening to URM's InfoSec Insider podcast. For more information, visit our website at urmconsulting.com.